Schopenhauer didn't write to comfort the comfortable. He wrote to awaken those who still cling to illusions of happiness. To him, suffering is not an accident. It is the ground state of life. We stumble into the world crying and spend our days pursuing fleeting pleasures only to slide back into disquiet. Yet the philosopher insisted, we are not mere victims of existence. We are its architect. With every craving, every denial, every futile attempt to outrun discomfort, you magnify the pain inherent in being. Your desires are siren calls that lure you into stormy seas of frustration. Your attachments bind you to a cycle of loss and longing. Your distractions anesthetize you from present misery, only to sharpen it later. Schopenhauer argued that true relief begins not in chasing satisfaction, but in renouncing the illusions that bind you, the illusions that whisper, you deserve more, even as you drown in discontent. In the reflections ahead, we will reveal 10 brutal ways you are deepening your own suffering, and how Schopenhauer's stark wisdom shows the path out, not toward endless joy, but toward equanimity, born of radical acceptance and disciplined will. Because the only way to ease life's agony is to stop being its willing apprentice. You chase desires that never satiate. Every new desire you clothe in hope carries within it the seed of fresh disappointment. Schopenhauer saw this clearly. Desire is not a path to fulfillment, but an endless treadmill where satisfaction vanishes the moment it appears. You think that acquiring a certain job, relationship, or possession will finally still the restless ache inside you. Yet once you grasp it, the object cools in your hand, the novelty fades, and your mind pivots to the next longing. Desire is a hungry ghost. You feed it and it only grows hungrier. This cycle of craving and fleeting contentment is the architecture of misery. You mistake the appearance of satisfaction for genuine peace. You believe that with just one more achievement, one more affirmation, one more escape from boredom, you will finally be safe from suffering. But Schopenhauer argued that suffering is the default setting of the will. Desire is the will's constant whisper, calling you ever onward, never allowing you to rest in being rather than becoming. To break this cycle, begin by recognizing your cravings for what they are. Illusory promises no object can truly deliver. Notice the moment your mind kindles a new desire. Pause, observe the tug in your chest, feel the restlessness arise. Ask yourself, is this meant to fill a hole in me or to inspire growth? The former breeds dependency, the latter can spark purposeful action. Next, practice contentment in the stillness between wants. Cultivate moments where no new goal holds your attention. Moments of simple awareness, free from the compulsion to acquire. You might sit in silence for 5 minutes, observing the rise and fall of your breath. You might walk without an agenda, noticing the world without plotting how to dominate it. Each pause erodes the power of desire over you. Finally, redirect your creative energy into expression rather than consumption. Instead of buying another thing, write, paint, move, or build. The will does not cease, it transforms. You channel your restless impulse into creating something that bears your signature, rather than chasing experiences crafted by others. Remember that Schopenhauer did not promise bliss. He offered a strategy for lessening suffering by seeing through the phantoms of endless craving. When you stop chasing desires that never satiate, you stand still long enough to see the ongoing aches subside. If only for a moment. In that pause, the space opens for genuine peace, an echo of the calm beyond the ceaseless will. You deny reality and multiply your pain. Denial is the most seductive of deceptions. You avert your gaze from harsh truths, your mortality, your flaws, the fragility of every bond, because confronting them feels unbearable. Yet Schopenhauer warned that refusing to see reality does not protect you. It deepens your suffering. When you repress anxiety about loss, your mind festers with unspoken dread. When you ignore the shadow side of your relationships, you are blindsided by betrayal. Denial is like a locked door. The intruder may leave for a moment, but sooner or later, it will burst back in with greater force. Denying reality springs from a fear of pain, but it multiplies pain by creating a gap between what is and what you insist on believing. You construct mental narratives to keep discomfort at bay, stories in which you are always the victim, the hero, or the innocent. When life contradicts these narratives, the conflict between your illusion and reality becomes an abyss of turmoil. The psyche thrashes to reconcile the two, generating anxiety, resentment, and despair. To escape this spiral, begin with radical honesty. Admit what you feel, even if the truth wounds you. Write down the fears you hide from yourself. Speak out the doubts you stifle in conversation. Name your losses and failures without rationalizing or minimizing them. Each admission closes the rift between illusion and actuality, grounding you in a reality you can work with. Next, practice presence in everyday life. When doubt or fear arises, don't decorate it with comforting fantasies. Sit with the bare sensation, the tightness in your chest, the hollow in your gut. Turn toward it as you would a living creature in distress. Allow its form to reveal itself without panic or judgment. Over time, you learn that the pain of reality, while sharp, is transient, whereas the pain of denial is chronic. Finally, cultivate acceptance of life's unalterable facts: pain, loss, death, as the essential backdrop against which meaning emerges. Acceptance is not resignation. It is the clearing of the canvas so you can paint with realism, not illusion. When you face reality with eyes unclouded by denial, you gain the clarity to choose responses that build resilience, rather than fueling the anxiety born of avoidance. Schopenhauer's bleak vision becomes, in practice, a liberating call to live fully awake. When you stop denying reality, you break the chains that magnify your suffering, and you reclaim the possibility of serenity in the face of what is. The will's endless striving becomes your torment. At the heart of Schopenhauer's philosophy lies a startling claim. Your essence is the will, a blind, relentless force that drives every need, every want, every action. Unlike a benevolent spark, this will does not rest. It strives eternally, dragging you from one goal to the next in an unbroken chain of longing. Each achievement gives birth to a new desire, ad infinitum. In this perpetual motion, you become a prisoner of your own nature. The will's ceaseless striving is what underlies all suffering. It demands satisfaction without ever granting it. You labor to fill the void, yet the void only expands. You climb ladder after ladder, yet you stand on shifting ground. This torment is not incidental, it is the very structure of existence. Schopenhauer describes life as an ongoing tension between craving and temporary relief, the momentary slack before the next protest of the will. Liberation from this torment does not lie in fulfilling more desires, but in diminishing the will's grip. Begin by examining the roots of your urges. Which needs are genuine necessities, hunger, shelter, companionship, and which are phantom cravings, manufactured by advertising, peer pressure, or your own insecurities. Distinguish the essential from the superfluous. Next, practice restraint as a discipline. Do not indulge every whim. When a desire arises, pause. Observe the impulse as if you were studying a wild animal at a distance. Feel its energy without acting on it immediately. Over time, you weaken the reflexive chain of wanting and satisfy the will's hunger for novelty with a stable sense of self-possession. Cultivate aesthetic experiences, music, art, nature, that elevate you beyond raw desire. In moments of deep immersion, the will's demands soften, and you glimpse a tranquility unshaped by yearning. These intervals become sanctuaries, where the will momentarily rests, offering you a taste of relief that is not built on more consumption or achievement. Finally, explore philosophical resignation, not as despair, but as a kind of strategic withdrawal. Recognize that you cannot conquer the will completely, but you can choose not to feed its wildest demands. This inner renunciation does not extinguish the will, it transforms your relationship with it, turning you from a runaway horse into a mindful rider. Schopenhauer did not offer bliss. He showed the way to lessening suffering by confronting the will's tyranny. When you curb the endless striving, you create the possibility of calm, a pause between desires where genuine peace can enter. Attachment to pleasure deepens your anguish. Pleasure is sold as the antidote to suffering, yet Schopenhauer revealed its dark underside. Attachment to pleasure is the fuel that stokes the fires of anguish. Every pleasurable moment imprints a standard your mind expects to repeat, and when reality inevitably falls short, because pleasure is fleeting, you are left grasping at emptiness. The more you cling to pleasure, the more you amplify the pain of its inevitable absence. Attachment arises in many forms: the longing for a relationship's early intoxication, the craving for the thrill of novelty, the pursuit of comfort as a refuge from discomfort. Each creates a tether that binds you. When circumstances change, which they always do, you experience not merely loss, but a shattering of the ideal you held. The contrast between memory and present reality intensifies your suffering. To loosen the grip of attachment, begin by observing the fleeting nature of pleasure. Notice how excitement peaks and ebbs within moments. Notice the flicker of joy, followed by the dull ache of wanting more. Recognize that no external condition can produce lasting bliss. Pleasure's very structure entails its dissolution. Then, shift your relationship with pleasure from possession to appreciation. When a pleasurable experience arises, good conversation, nourishing food, creative flow, allow yourself to feel it fully, but hold it like a guest in your home, not a tenant with a permanent lease. Savor the taste, the sound, the sensation, and then let it go, acknowledging that its arrival and departure are equally natural. Cultivate dispassionate joy. Find fulfillment in the process rather than the outcome. Whether creating art or solving a problem, immerse yourself in the doing, not the applause. This inward focus softens attachment because your reward becomes the activity itself, not its external fruits. Finally, explore Stoic practices of voluntary discomfort. Fast, endure cold, embrace silence. These exercises remind you that pleasure is optional. When you willingly face minor hardships, the loss of pleasure loses its sting. You build resilience in the absence of comfort, and your mind learns that contentment can persist even when pleasure is absent. Schopenhauer's bitter prescription is this: scarcity of pleasure can be a cure for its overvaluation. When you detach from fleeting highs, you steady your inner sea. Pleasure becomes a passing breeze, not a turbulent storm, and in that steadiness, your anguish diminishes because you no longer ride the wild waves of relentless craving. You distract yourself from suffering, only to amplify it. When pain arises, your first instinct is to flee into distraction. A scroll through social media, a binge of entertainment, a shopping spree. These diversions anesthetize for a moment, but Schopenhauer reminds us, avoidance deepens suffering. Distraction is a refusal to feel, and unprocessed feelings nestle in the shadows, festering into chronic anxiety, depression, or inner unrest. Every distraction is a renegade soldier in the war against your own consciousness. You think you're buying relief, but you're actually renting it at the cost of long-term peace. The next moment of discomfort finds you less prepared, your tolerance weaker, your distress louder. You compound the problem by layering more diversions onto the first, building a tower of avoidance that heightens the vertigo when it inevitably topples. To break this cycle, cultivate presence in your suffering. When unrest stirs, stop the scroll. Sit quietly. Let the raw sensation surface. Notice its texture, location, intensity. Label it if that helps. This is anxiety, or this is heartbreak. Give it space to exist without judgment. Paradoxically, when you stare suffering in the face, its power over you begins to wane. Practice micro-meditations throughout your day. Even 10 seconds of silence can interrupt the reflex to flee. Breathe deeply. Anchor in your body. Feel the internal currents and gently thank them for their message, I see you. Through this process, distraction loses its allure because you realize the comfort it offers is fleeting, whereas the strength gained from facing discomfort endures. Schopenhauer did not promise bliss, but he taught that less suffering follows direct engagement. When you stop hiding from your pain, you shrink its dominion. You transform distraction from strategy to last resort. Use sparingly rather than compulsively, and in that clarity your anguish diminishes because you are no longer running from shadows, but meeting yourself in the light. Fear of solitude fuels your inner turmoil. You fill your days with noise, company, chatter, media. because solitude feels like a pit. Yet Schopenhauer argued that solitude is not emptiness, but opportunity, a crucible where the restless will encounter itself. When you avoid being alone, you run from your own thoughts, desires, and fears, and these unexamined currents churn into inner chaos. Solitude exposes the dissonance between your ideal self and your real self. It surfaces doubts. Am I enough? What do I truly want? So you distract, you busy work, you socialize to buff out the edges. But these tactics only delay the reckoning. The mind in flight carries its shadows into every room, and the crowd's applause never silences the tumult within. To transform solitude from enemy to ally, reframe it as a companion in self-discovery. Begin with small doses, 15 minutes of uninterrupted quiet. No phone, no music, no plan. Feel the silences between breaths. Let your thoughts rise and fall like waves. Do not judge them, simply observe. Over time, this practice builds a refuge in yourself, an inner sanctum where you can rest without distraction. Next, journal your inner dialogue. Write down the questions solitude raises, the fears it uncovers, and the insights it gifts. These pages become a mirror, reflecting the landscape of your soul. You learn patterns of self-sabotage, habitual avoidance, or unrealized longings, and you gain the power to respond rather than react. Schopenhauer saw solitude as the birthplace of wisdom. In the quiet, you confront the engine of your will, not as a victim, but as a conscious steward. The fear subsides when you realize that your own company is the most honest witness you will ever know. And as your comfort in solitude grows, the inner turmoil dissolves, because you no longer need to drown your unrest in noise. You sit with it, understand it, and it finally gives way to calm. You seek meaning externally and suffer the void. In a world bustling with achievements, status, and spectacle, you believe meaning resides out there, in accolades, relationships, causes. Schopenhauer warned that external meaning is a mirage, bright in the distance but hollow at its core. When you tether your sense of purpose to factors beyond your control, you gamble with despair. If praise dries up, if love falters, if trends shift, the void yawns beneath you. Meaning born of externals is conditional. It depends on fortune, on others' approval, on the fickle currents of culture. When those conditions change, as they always do, your purpose evaporates and suffering surges. You chase the next status boost, the next relationship, the next cause, only to find the emptiness growing as you circle further from the wellspring of meaning, your own inner stance. To anchor meaning within, cultivate self-generated values. Identify what you stand for, irrespective of reward. Perhaps it is clarity, courage, beauty, compassion. Choose one, then live by it daily. Speak it, craft it, witness how life responds, not in applause, but in the quiet confirmation of congruence between your inner chart and your outer voyage. Engage in purposeful solitude to strengthen this inner compass. Reflect on what you would pursue if applause were impossible. Write mission statements in your journal, brief declarations of your self-made values. Return to them when the external polls grow loud. Schopenhauer believed true meaning emerges when you transcend craving for happiness and embrace the commitment to your own will. Your values become your crucible and your sanctuary. When the world offers no external shore, you still stand firm because your purpose is inseparable from your being. And in that integration, the void closes, replaced by the quiet depth of a life lived from within. Clinging to self-image intensifies your suffering. Your self-image, crafted from roles, achievements, and the approval of others, becomes a fragile edifice you protect at all costs. Schopenhauer saw this attachment as yet another source of suffering. When you base your identity on transient markers, success, beauty, ethical standing, every challenge to that image sends shockwaves through your psyche. You perform, for the mirror, for the applause, for the virtual thumbs up, afraid to show the cracks beneath the varnish. Yet those cracks exist, and the harder you buff them, the more pressure builds, until the entire facade risks collapsing in humiliation. You suffer in silence, guarding the persona rather than embracing the flawed human within. To ease this suffering, start by dismantling your self-pitch brick. Examine the roles you cling to. I am the achiever. I am the helper. I am the expert. Notice how each role imposes expectations and creates fear of failure. Then glimpse the person behind the roles. Imperfect, evolving, raw. Affirm your humanity. I am more than what I do. Practice transparent authenticity. Share small truths of vulnerability with trusted companions. Admit mistakes. Express doubts. Reveal your uncertainty. Each act of honesty chips away at the brittle self-assembly, replacing it with the organic strength of self-acceptance. Engage in identity experiments. Take on tasks that don't align with your established persona. Dance if you're shy. Create if you're logical. Rest if you're a workaholic. Notice how the anxiety overstepping dissolves once you realize your worth does not hinge on one fixed identity. Schopenhauer taught that freedom lies beyond the ego's prison. When you release the rigid self-image, you stand in the vast expanse of being, imperfect, unpredictable, and yet profoundly alive. The suffering born of defending an image fades, replaced by the serenity of a self unbound by its own illusion. Lack of compassion for others reflects inner misery. You believe empathy is optional, reserved for the good or the spiritual. Yet Schopenhauer saw compassion as the bridge that spans the chasm of suffering, both yours and others. When you withhold compassion, you reinforce the walls around your own pain, deepening the loneliness at your core. A heart closed to another's anguish is a heart barricaded against its own. Your contempt for the weak, your impatience with the troubled, and your judgment of the undeserving are not signs of strength. They are symptoms of a wounded self that fears its own vulnerability. You turn away from others' suffering to avoid feeling your own. Each time you refuse an outstretched hand, you harden the parts of your psyche that crave connection and solace. You confirm the belief that you are isolated, different, and therefore alone in your misery. Compassion dissolves this lie. It requires you to see the shared architecture of pain, the universality of loss, fear, and longing. When you recognize another's tears as echoes of your own, the walls crumble. You no longer view compassion as charity, but as self-repair. In comforting another, you comfort yourself. In bearing witness to their struggle, you bear witness to your humanity. To cultivate compassion, practice active listening. Hear the raw emotion behind words without judgment or advice. Sit with someone's pain as you would sit with your own. Let the discomfort of their grief move through you. Notice how your body tightens, your mind distracts. You're afraid of feeling too much. Persist. Stay present. Each act of empathetic presence erodes the bitterness in your heart. Next, perform small acts of kindness without expectation of return. A genuine smile to a stranger, a patient word to the frustrated, a moment of solidarity in someone's shame. These gestures crack open your interior fortress. They prove that compassion is not scarce, it flows when you permit it. Schopenhauer argued that only through compassion can we temper the ceaseless suffering of existence. By extending kindness outward, you lubricate the gears of your own joy. You transform misery into purpose. You become a balm, not a blade, for others and for yourself. You ignore renunciation, the path to equanimity. In a world obsessed with acquisition, renunciation feels countercultural, an admission of defeat. But Schopenhauer insisted that true serenity arises not from endless accumulation, but from letting go. Renunciation is not nihilism. It is the conscious shedding of desires that chain you to ceaseless striving. When you ignore this path, you remain tethered to an appetite that can never be sated. Your calendar bulges with commitments, your inbox overflows with demands, your mind races with aspirations. You chase one success after another, believing fulfillment lies just beyond the next achievement, yet every victory only sharpens the edge of expectation. Now you need more recognition, more wealth, more power. The will's hunger is unquenchable, and you feed it until exhaustion steals your peace. Renunciation offers a different calculus. It asks you to examine each desire and ask, is this essential to my being, or a phantom born of societal pressure? To renounce is to say enough to the compulsive toil of the will. You relinquish attachments that inflate your identity, the title that impresses, the image that seduces, the ambition that distracts. Begin with material renunciation. Release possessions that clutter your life without enriching it. Donate what you do not need. Simplify your space so your mind can rest. Notice how less stuff means less maintenance, less anxiety, less consumption-driven anxiety. Next, practice psychological renunciation. Forgive slights, abandon grudges, let go of stories that fuel your ego. Each narrative you release frees mental energy previously bound to self-justification. In that freedom, the mind finds calm. Finally, embrace spiritual renunciation. Surrender the frantic search for meaning in externals and turn inward. Cultivate silence, solitude, and simplicity. In these pauses, you discover an undercurrent of equanimity, an unshakable center that no triumph or disaster can dislodge. Schopenhauer did not promise euphoria, only a steadiness of soul. Renunciation is the vessel for that steadiness. When you relinquish what you do not need, you awaken to what you cannot lose. The clear witness within. In that witness, you find true reprieve from suffering, an equanimity born of choosing less and gaining more, the radiant calm that endures even as the will hums its eternal song.